कितने साल के हो?
17।
इन लोगों ने जबरदस्ती रखा है यहाँ पे। हम लोग तुम जैसी लड़कियों की हेल्प करते हैं यहाँ से निकलने में।
तेरे लिए तो लड़कों की लाइन लगने वाली है, और फिर तो यहाँ से पुर होके जाऊंगी कहाँ?
डरो मत, मैं अच्छी जॉब दिलाऊंगी तुझे।
पापा प्रीति कहाँ जा रही है?
अच्छा, दूसरी वाली भी आ गई। इसको भी साथ में विदा कर दो ना। नहीं दादा ठाकुर।
पापा प्रीति कल से सारे काम करेगी, कोई गलती नहीं करेगी। पापा प्रीति के पास मुझे भी भेज दो, वहाँ जाके मैं भी काम कर लूंगी।
भेज दूंगा तेरे को तेरी बहन के पास।
कहाँ है प्रीति?
ऐसे गली में थोड़ी ना खड़ी रहेगी, तो घर पे होगी ना डार्लिंग।
हेलो, वेलकम टू मुंबई।
प्रीति से मिलना है तो पहले अपना उधार चुकता करना, फिर तू और तेरी बहन जिधर मर्जी जाने का है जाओ।
तू
मैं जैसा बोलेंगी करेंगी ना तो प्रीति को जल्दी मिल पाएंगी।
तेरी बहन है ना तेरे पास? You're a really brave, courageous girl.
विलेज गर्ल्स, वर्जिन्स, इनोसेंट, समझ नहीं आता ऐसी लड़कियां पैदा नहीं होती इस शहरों में।
तू जानती है ना मुझे, रुकने वाली नहीं हूं मैं। कुछ भी हो जाए प्रीति, कैसे भी ढूंढ कर निकालूंगी। लव, सोनिया।
Lashondra, please come to the stage. Queens, please follow her.
Good morning, everyone. It's a sensitive clicker. I'm not a podium person, so I'm going to stand and walk. But before I start talking, I want to have everyone take a few deep breaths. Take the tension out of your shoulders, your neck, and breathe. So my name is Lashondra Vernon. I am one of the many founders of the Human Trafficking Task Force of Greater Milwaukee. And I am basically setting the foundation for the conversation that we're going to have so that you understand both the local and the global implications of human trafficking and how it's impacted Milwaukee specifically, but also how it really has no bounds. This is an area that I've done a lot of work in, so I'm going to walk you through it as quickly as I can so you can have an understanding from the large perspective of the global issue. So while we're here, the things I want to make sure I always do whenever I discuss this, definitions are so important. The definition of trafficking is what got me active in the work. We're also going to talk about how the global issue became local. And we're going to discuss peace movements and how they've impacted the conversation. And then, of course, the origins of our Human Trafficking Task Force, led by my sister up front here, Dana Worrell-Patterson. So this is the United Nations definition for human trafficking. The process by which and by the means and the goal make up this definition. So I'm not going to read it off to you, but I will say to you, as a young woman growing up, falling in love with some man somewhere in my life, I met a couple of frogs I shouldn't have kissed. and several of them qualify for the definition of trafficking. Read it. I bring this to your attention because most of us have experienced conditions that are considered trafficking conditions. And we love to other this issue. But let me help you guys first. Let's level set. There is not a single cultural background, gender, race, economic status that has not been impacted by trafficking. It is also one of the hardest to track, and so we have no idea until we care about the person who was trafficked. So these are important things to know how we got here in Milwaukee. How many of you have seen the power and control wheel for intimate partner violence issues? So I see some hands, the lights are bright, so I didn't catch everyone's. It is not different when we use it for human trafficking advocacy. The same things used to control a person, financial abuse, physical abuse, emotional and social abuse, are all employed the exact same way. In the definition, we tend to focus on a couple things, but one, a really important one that we have to remember: children cannot consent. So of all the populations, no matter the means, children are not able to consent, so therefore they are automatically victims of trafficking. I want to stress again, we will not other this, not also by binary issues. I don't care whether it is a boy or a girl or someone who is still working through their identity. This is impacting us all the same way. So how I came to this: there is a little woman that is a Milwaukee legend. Her name is Rose Datesman. She recently passed away at about 93, and I met her while I was working for 9 to 5, National Association of Working Women. And she asked me to help work on the shadow report on mass incarceration and its impact in Milwaukee to the Committee on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination. So that's how I started working with her. Lovely woman, extremely bossy, said I had to do things with the words like shall and must. I've been changed forever because of her, and I've inherited some of her behaviors, and I'm proud of them. Many of you have heard me say shall and must as well. But she got me engaged after doing the shadow report on the human trafficking issue. This organization is an NGO with the United Nations. They have United Nations status. They are able to testify on all the treaties. So they've always been involved in the peace process. So we know several forms of peace process. There is the ones that most of us in Milwaukee have been involved in. That is the protesting, that is coming and showing up and advocating. But there's also more formal processes that exist. A good example of that is having United Nations status, to being able to advocate for an issue that comes forward. Why is this important? Well, first, we had a United States company violate the rights of humans around the world as a trafficker. They were called Dynacorp. Dynacorp had immunity. Immunity means that they could not be prosecuted for the crime that they committed within the contract that they had with the United States. At the time, a woman named Madeline Reese was part of the Office of Trafficking in Persons, but very active with whistleblowing on this. There was a film created. The organization sponsored the film, took it nationally, but then it got national attention, and it caught the attention of Hillary Clinton, who was then Secretary of State, and then we went into hearings. Milwaukee hosted a hearing. We had a hearing at Mount Mary. At that hearing, legislators, community members all came together to talk about the issues. And many things came of that. One of the things that came of it was a task force requirement that was put into the legislation. States and federal task forces were put in place at that time as well. I'm going to get back to this. This is important to the issue. So I'm active with this organization. My sister, Coretta Scott King, was definitely a member. Lots of black women were engaged. But I just want to bring up the intersectionality issues that we experienced doing this work around trafficking while black and brown folks were experiencing this here in Milwaukee. We were on a call, everybody was saying who needs to host it. But Milwaukee at the time had a report called Hidden in Plain Sight that was done by the state that was measuring the impact of trafficking. And so that report was contributed to by many domestic violence organizations, going back to that power and control wheel that we just simply applied to human trafficking as the same issue. When that happened, we also experienced some issues with ICE. So that gave them a loophole where they could be more active with taking people from homes and with stings and with busts. So it got complicated. But we in Milwaukee decided that we could do something different. Congresswoman Moore wrote very clear notes after those hearings, clarifying that the people who were in those communities that were impacted should be able to be given the ability to advocate for what they're seeing on the streets in the communities. That was the initiative we needed for our county board members to consider creating the task force. Once the task force was created, they identified members, and the loudest person in the room always becomes the chair. And so that is how I became the chair. Think about that the next time you want to be Susie's social justice. You will now have to figure out how to address that problem yourself. And so we did this work with absolutely no idea what we were signing ourselves up for. And I did it as long as I could. I will get to that point also. But we're grateful for the fact that we had legislators in place that were able to make the right notes to the U.S. State Department. So the cities that were chosen based on where the issue was spiking. Milwaukee had been identified as a hub, and that was coming from the state level. And so all these things were the perfect storm for advocacy. And so the Human Trafficking Task Force was born. We started at the county. We transitioned over to the city of Milwaukee with the Office of Violence Prevention within the Commission on Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault. And then I transitioned out, and I want to say something about why I did. I have a daughter. She's 18 years old. And while I was doing this work, my makeup cute, y'all, hold on. Whew. I realized I didn't want to be the mother fighting for everyone else's children and not my own. And so I stepped back, and it was the best thing I could have ever done, because I gave it over to Dana, and we've continued to fight. And so that is how we got here today. I had no intention to tear up, but here it is. Thank you. And so now, we've had many organizations, many members of the task force have stepped up to create what I couldn't, what some of the mothers couldn't, what some of others couldn't in this community, and that was places that were safe, where the people we were identifying while we were addressing a problem blind. And so now, I'm going to transition us over to our panel discussions, because this is why we're here, to learn not only how it got to be a local and global issue, we were advocating for both. Anybody who came to Milwaukee from somewhere else was just as vulnerable as a young lady who grew up here. So it was never one or the other, it's all. Let me take off my gender. Any body, any human could be impacted the same way. And so I'm going to come and sit down with my sisters. I'm not standing at no podium. And we're going to have a quick conversation, but then we do want to transition this over to all of you for questions as well. Thank you. So I'm going to start out with Debbie and Nancy and ask you the question to describe the lived experience you've had in doing this work and what has connected you to this work since you began.
So I'm Debbie. That's Nancy. Wanted to just say that the reason that I started doing this work, actually started doing this work over 40 years ago, but we weren't identifying it or calling it human trafficking at that time. We transitioned into creating the Convergence Resource Center because we saw people in the city of Milwaukee that were struggling with something that no one was really identifying as their real problem. And we opened to be able to help them because we had several incidences of people that were describing things to us that were not prostitution. It was something else. People were being forced to do things, people were being trapped. And so what we did was we provided a place that they could come and get the healing supportive services that they needed to be able to return to society or for the first time be active in society if they were members of a family that believed human trafficking was what they were supposed to be doing, that it was the family business. So as a result of that, we have created about 22 different services to be able to help people that are coming out of human trafficking.
So I'm the Nancy that they were talking about. So the reason why we are who we are is because of who God said I am. I am a survivor of exploitation. So the basis of why I'm in this work is because I want to be that modern day Harriet Tubman that my son calls me, the one that goes out into the trenches without fear, without shame, and to let people know that there is a perpetual way out through the light that's shown when you keep showing up. So Fresh Start was born because I was that girl that was curious. I was that girl that wanted to be bigger and growner than my underwear decided I was. But then all of those past traumas that I hadn't dealt with from the beginning caught up with me. So my yes became a yes when it should have been no, even when I knew better. So Fresh Start started doing the thing that I wanted to have happen for me, is to have a safe place to be able to communicate. So when anything is explained, it's understood without as much explanation to re-victimize the person again, but also give a safe landing space where others can congregate and talk about it through our training programs. And then don't forget about the women that are out there on the street through our Purposeful Purse program, but also have a safe place every month through our I'm a Survivor Women's Empowerment Group, and to continue to stay connected to others that are doing the work so the load can be lighter than it is heavier. So I'm here for the long haul because I believe this is my life journey, and I do what I do to make a difference because I know that a difference can be made.
So I want to ask Frida a question. So what sparked your passion around this issue?
Well, first I want to start by saying that I know the trailer you watched was in Hindi and it wasn't subtitled. And I was like, oh, I wish they could read the subtitles so they know what is actually going on. And as I watched the trailer for I don't even know how many times, the one thing I realized is that the sign for cries of help, the signs of coercion, the signs of young girls, vulnerable young girls, I must say, being dragged into something that they're not aware of. The signs of fathers desperate, trying to figure out how they're going to make ends meet, not knowing how they're going to make their family survive, having to make this decision, selling his daughter. This happens to be a very universal subject matter and requires no translation or subtitles. And so I was kind of, okay, I'm glad no one's reading the subtitles and they can just focus on the one feeling that everyone needs to have in their hearts today is open your eyes.
Yeah.
The signs are all out there. In fact, as we go through airports, open your eyes. Airports, bus stations, #1 places for traffickers to find young girls and boys. And so quite frankly, my passion comes from being terrified of not having a passion. Terrified of not being able to stand up for something that I know is so rampant and quite frankly all around us every minute of the day. I grew up in India and in Mumbai, and of course, as a young girl, you don't think that any of these topics or issues is ever your issue, because you read it in the newspapers on page 3 or page 6, but then it starts affecting you because you realize that the girls' ages they mention is the same age as yours. They're 8, they're 11, they're 15, they're 16, they're 18, they're 60, 60. A 60-year-old woman in India got raped, and I was like, a 60-year-old woman, I do not understand this. And then you think about the perpetrators, and they're men. The end users are men. And what are we doing wrong in raising those men is the next topic that comes to mind. My family is a family of 2 girls, my sister and I, and all my cousins are boys. And so I think the passion came from being a leader to my brothers, an example to my sister and my sisters in school, and the passion came from being around women like Nancy and Debbie, just hearing what you just said today and how you started your own journey. It comes from knowing that I can imbibe from all of these women, learn from the women who have been through situations that they have found themselves out of it, be inspired by them, and then use my incredible platform that I never take lightly, the platform that my film industry has given me, to amplify the voices of these women and my own. And so that's where the passion comes from. It quite frankly comes from being terrified.
That's it. That's it.
So I heard passion, and I'm excited that you're talking about that. I know we're all in this space because we're passionate about creating the solutions, and at least providing a fresh start to, right? To the people that are impacted. So you answered the second question we had. You just jumped right on into it. That's okay. About passions, I want to hold space for you both to talk about your passion and what is driving you to do the work.
Again, just to reiterate the fact that it's because it's real and it's not a made-for-TV movie and I lived it, it helps me to continue to do the work. We were blessed to open up Humble Beginnings drop-in location because we were on the street meeting people where they were, but we didn't have a place for them to come if they decided to. And October 4th of 2018, we reached a year this year, and we served 189 women, ranging from ages 18 to 64, that have been impacted by life unresolved trauma. And if they're in with us just for the night, we're giving them an opportunity to know that the next day could be even better if they chose to do so. So I stay committed to going to other places that have at-risk girls that have been court ordered there, to make sure that I show up and let them know that I am where they can be and live a mirrored life, very transparent, letting them know everything that took place in my life and know that there could be some different steps that can be taken. And I'm grateful to Dr. Lassiter for allowing me to be introduced to what's called Ending the Game training. So I am a certified training for Ending the Game intervention training. That's 10 weeks, but also a supporter trainer, a trainer for that. But then God gave me next steps too. So we just talk about everything that's going to happen when you leave outside of the confines of these doors. When you go back home to your parents, it'll piss you off. When you go back to school and the guy is still smoking weed. When your lower region still wants to have sexual activity. When you want those new shoes and can't buy them. We talk about real life issues that matter because guess what? They're still thinking about it. So we want to make sure that we rewire the brain to talk about things and perform differently once that person comes back to you or you start feeling those things again. And letting them know that it wasn't overnight that I made it here and I didn't wake up like this. And sometimes I still struggle. And I'm grateful.
So I'm going to preface my answer by saying this, that I have learned that it is important to find your lane and stay in your lane. And when you are in your lane, it looks like to everyone else that you're going way above and beyond, but your passion is driving you and it seems normal. It seems like this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And that is what my passion is for this. I have a great concern for the children, but for me, I was coming in contact with grown women that there was no help for them. So my passion became when these grown women were children, there was no one there helping them. So we have to reach back and help that child that's still inside that woman. And when I could look at them and see myself and hear incidences where if I would have made a different choice, I would be where they are. And I wanted that help to be there for them because I might need that help one day. So my passion that drives me is knowing that there is another human being, male or female, out there, no matter how old they are, that has gone through some kind of trauma that we have turned a blind eye to for a long time. And we still sometimes do in situations turn a blind eye to and act like it's not really happening, okay? But we still have to provide help. So my passion comes from knowing that I'm in a position to be able to provide help for other human beings. And that's what drives me in this work.
Awesome.
Powerful, powerful. I just want to acknowledge the lifelong trauma theme that just went through your responses, and also recognize as we are working as a community to address the wellness of people overall, how those traumas are layered on top of every single person, no matter which impact they've had. I want to ask you another question, Frida, and then I think we're going to open it up to the audience. So what direction do you want the activism that you're doing with the film you produced to take? What should it look like in the communities, in the public?
Well, I think the first thing I'll be very honest with you, when we started the journey on this film 10 years ago, there was a lot of education for me to have. Like I said, you know, we very often think, this couldn't possibly be my life, this wouldn't happen to me. And then when you start going through the stories of the various women you think it couldn't happen to them, and you read that it's happened to them, you speak with them, and you hear about how it happened, it dawns on you that you're not that immune to this.
Right.
And so the education process for the last 10 years, the film couldn't get financed for 10 years actually, because it was such a difficult subject matter that it was a first-time director who had worked with actually an organization in India called Apne Aap, helping in the rescue of many, many, many girls. So he was deeply entrenched in this issue already and wanted to bring this film to life. But while I saw his passion as an actor, there were many who had to put the money in, did not see the passion. And they did not think it would do well at the box office, and that's when we kind of decided this was not for the box office. This was purely for the education. This was purely for people to open their eyes and see what a young girl goes through when she's plucked innocently out of her life and forced into a life that she never consented to, that she never chose for herself. And we wanted the film to inspire people to not turn a blind eye. So in terms of this film turning into a piece of activism, we're just hoping that the visual medium inspires people to see this issue differently, to stop making it the otherization of an issue, that it cannot happen to me. And then of course we're using this film at policy level in India as well. It is a very tough terrain in India, and I do not know if there is any knowledge of what's happening in the country at the moment, but young Muslim girls are very much at risk as well. And it is a very, very difficult time, but we need to continue doing the work, and that is the only reason why I feel filmmakers can use their art to kind of go out there and tell the story. And apart from that, the only other thing that I feel is very important to me is to know that, as you said, Debbie, to stay in your lane. I know what I can do best is learn and perform and speak and bring other people up front with me, but I leave the experts to do what they do best. And so with Cast LA, an organization that I work with in Los Angeles, Kay Buck, the CEO, knows exactly how to go about these issues. I don't meddle in any which way in policy work when I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing or don't know what I'm supposed to be saying. And I think that's another very important aspect of activism, that along the way, I have seen people make mistakes, and I do not want to do that. So I will only speak from the point of view of being an artist, and that's what I'm hoping this film achieves.
Thank you, that's important as well. So I just want to just level set before I turn it over. This issue and the impact of this issue is local and global. The impact of this issue has layers of trauma that people are living with while doing it, living with while avoiding it, living with, period, and learning how to manage every day. And so before we open it up to the audience, I just want to say, out of respect for all of my sisters up here, please think about the impact of your question before you frame it, because it is a very sensitive topic for each of us in different ways. And we want to make sure what we're talking about and discussing in this is doing good and not harm. So I will turn it over to Kweku at this time.
Well, first of all, I just want to tell you all that I love you. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart. I'm listening to you. And yeah, clap for them. Let's pour them with love. Frida, you said that the film was in Indian and not with subtitles. I didn't even recognize that. I thought I was listening to real words because I just saw what you said. So you may be more of an expert than you think. Nancy, I see your tears and I know your journey. And when we see the exodus, I understand what that means. You're leaving a place and entering a different place. And I just want to tell you from the bottom of my heart, I've worked with Nancy, with my fraternity. I worked with her with the Milwaukee Public School System, specifically Black-led and Male Achievement Program, where you've been able to initiate us and educate us in ways in which we're hypocritical, in which ways we still offend, in ways we don't even want to admit it. But you bring a light to us to help make us want to be better, and I want to thank you for that. And Doc on the end. I've heard about her for years, for the work that she's done. And whenever you look at something in this field, we talk about how do we help the helpers. Because the vicarious trauma, the secondary trauma that those who try to heal have to take up on is something heavy. Not too long ago, we had a very prominent pastor to commit suicide on the eve of World Suicide Prevention Day. Right after that, we had a college professor, well, he was a professor, but he was the head of the psychological department at the University of Penn, who killed himself. A person who spent his life helping, but yet all of the weight on had no one to help him. And so, Doc, I want to ask the first question with you is, what do you do to protect yourself, to help yourself in the midst of helping others?
Thank you. It's very important that we remember self-care, as both of you have alluded to, because vicarious trauma is real. There were incidences. My first incident with vicarious trauma was after watching 4 grown women go from sitting straight up to curled up in the fetal position, crying uncontrollably because they heard the voice of their former trafficker on the television. He wasn't even in the room. But then listening to them, we left there, and the next morning I couldn't move. And I had never experienced that before. I later found out that that was vicarious trauma. So I'm going to say, because of the psychological aspects of dealing with a person that's been trafficked, and because of what you have to help them walk through, it is important that you institute and practice self-care, because that's what I do. I have Debbie days. Right?
Speak on that.
On Debbie's day, Debbie does whatever Debbie wants to do. Debbie might keep her pajamas on and pop popcorn and watch movies all day. I'm not answering the door, I'm not answering the phone. You need to rejuvenate. So if you're going to do this kind of work, or any kind of work where you're really delving in and helping people, you have to take care of yourself. So that's one of the things that I do, and we also practice that at the Convergence Center.
And one of the things when we talk about self-care, Lashandra, you started us off with that, just having us to pause and to meditate. When we look at the art of mindfulness, that's something that you hear very rapidly now. It's kind of a buzz term, but it's so very powerful. So at this time, we just want to invite you to close your eyes. And what I want you to do is to think about someone who you love, someone who you care about. I want you to send them positive energy now, not knowing what they're going through. They may have a smile on their face outwardly, but could be going through some internal pains inwardly. And what I want you to do is to send them positive vibrations, to send them love, to send them hope, to send them care. want you to think about the best moment that you had with them, the reason why they popped in your mind when we started this exercise in the first place. And then I want you to just take a moment to be grateful that this person was blessed to be in your life and that you share a reciprocal relationship of love, of caring, of genuine giving. Slowly, I invite you to open your eyes. Take a deep breath. Inhale all of the trouble, and exhale with a sense of hope and gratitude. Just by a show of hands, how many people feel just a little bit better? Honestly.
Just a little bit.
Everybody should, because not that I'm a genius, but it's what Sister Nancy said.
You are a genius.
I'm going to accept that, my sister. I'm going to accept it. I'm glad. It's cognitive restructuring. From a neurobiological standpoint, what we just did is increase the endorphins and the dopamine and the serotonin levels in our body. Oftentimes, when people are severely depressed, they will turn to psychotropics, and that has its place. But one of the ones they give you for depression is what they call an SSRI, and that's a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor, and it boosts your serotonin. But the thing is, the body creates serotonin naturally. But when we're sad, when we're lonely, when we're depressed, we do those things to decrease our serotonin. So what you just did by thinking of those good memories, serotonin. So when we talk about self-care, it's about those smaller self-introspection, of self-care that brings us up. But now I'm going to tell you what's going to increase your serotonin just a little bit more. That person who you thought about, at some point in time today, I want you to text them, I want you to call them, I want you to look them in the face and say, I was given this strange assignment during the Social Justice Summit to think about somebody who we loved, we cared about, and you were the one that popped in my mind. We were told to think about the things that made us happy to have you in our life, and I want you to tell them that story. Because see, this is what you're going to recognize is when you see them smile, when you hear them cry, and you see their serotonin goes up, guess what? Your serotonin goes up again. And you said, I'm a genius, and I'm a genius because I am the grandson of Daisy Mae Cockerham, who told me, as I told you before, the best way to heal yourself is to help others. Amen. See, I didn't need to go to school to go get into neuropsychology to learn about that, because my grandmother from Chickasaw County, Houston, Mississippi, told me that when I was 6. I didn't understand it, but I understand it later in life. And as we start to go into, and I'm going to invite people to come up to be able to ask questions, but what I want to do is to invite all of our panelists just one time to, and we've kind of answered this question in a sense, but if you will, just to delve a little bit deeper. And because of your passion and because of the things you've done, I want you to tell us of a story on how you helped in your own way and you've seen it help someone. So Doc, we'll start with you and come down the line. So just talk about your work in this, whether it's through your activism, whether it's through your arts, and a story that's going to make us know that it is a reason to have hope, that the things we do are not in vain.
Well, I'm gonna use Nancy because she's sitting right next to me. Yes. When I first met Nancy, I told her that she was an M&M, where she was hard on the outside, but soft on the inside. And Nancy then we started a relationship, and she actually came to our center and went through Ending the Game, which is a 10-week psychologically walking you out of the commercial sex trade. Well, Nancy took what she learned, and now Nancy is an Ending the Game facilitator helping other women. So she's giving back, but her ministry already was fluent and really doing well. But when I look at her and I see her and all the great things that she's doing, I can use her an example to another survivor and say, hey, look, your sister's making it. You can make it too. You know, so that's what I'm saying. That's the story for me.
I'm gonna use that same story to make it easy for myself. It was me. No, I'm gonna put a few girls in the same story. When I'm working with the at-risk youth and I show up and I show up there on Mondays to have the Next Steps group with them. And they leave there, and I give them my phone number, and I tell them it's not business, it's personal, and you can call me at any time if you need me. And they take me up on that offer, and they call me Mama Nancy because they said I'm a mother figure in their lives. And when they shoot to me text messages of I love you and good night and I'm doing well, I just got a job, just got my driver's license, and stay connected with me, and they don't have to, that makes me know that what I told them and what I shared with them and how transparent I was before them, that they believed me, and we still stay connected. Years later, a young lady got a job, and she sent me a picture of a table that she did herself at a resort that she got a job at. This is one of the people that they thought was not going to make it, and she's still making it today. She graduated from high school. She has a job. She's back with her family, and she's prospering. And she makes sure she reaches out to me at least weekly to say that she loves me and that she can't wait to see me. So we'll be meeting up soon. That's what I wanted to share.
Well, my story is a bit indirect way of knowing that the work that I was doing with this organization for a while really started paying off. I got told off by this young girl. So I was in Ethiopia with Plan International, and Plan International and I were focused on figuring out how to get young girls to school, because a lot of them drop out as soon as they attain puberty, and there's various reasons for that, and that probably calls for a whole new different panel. But so this was a Friday. My flight got in late. We get to the school. The girls have been waiting with their teachers and their parents for about an hour and a half. We finally sit down, we get into a discussion, everyone speaks, everyone has a translator, they say whatever they've had to say. And right at the end of the session, this young girl named Hiwot raised her hand and she stood up, and a translator stood up with her, and she gently told the translator to sit down because she had this under control. And she said, and I thought she was going to talk about what she was benefiting from this school program. And she said, I'm really glad that all of you, in English, all of you have come to visit the school today, and you care about us and our education. But with all due respect, Ms. Pinto, I would really like if you came on a Saturday and not a Friday, because I had to skip my chemistry class to make this panel. And I tell you the joy I felt at being told off, because I knew that the school program was empowering these girls to say what they wanted to say. Because more often than never, girls are told, don't say what you want to say because you need to show respect. They're coming here for you. But no, she prefers having her chemistry class, and by all means, she should.
That's right. That's right.
And so I feel like that was a real moment of validation that this work that we're going out there and doing, there are different ways of seeing the results of it, and Hiwot will forever be etched in my memory. I asked her, I kind of forced her to take a photo with me so I would always remember this moment. And I feel like that's my story. There are so many, but this one I will never forget, and it happened like 6 years ago.
Beautiful. Awesome.
So I just want to highlight, when I left the Human Trafficking Task Force, I did it for a lot of reasons, but having an adolescent girl who, if you follow me on social media, she is all the things gorgeous, that I had to just really check myself and be at home and be present for. But I think the greatest thing that came out of me actually leaving is I was able to be a teenage safe house. So I had all of her friends at my home, boys, girls, children showing up with guitars, head wrapping, teaching them how to do all these things, honest conversations that I never thought I would sit through and not snap, and everybody eating my food. But I would not trade it, because those children did not have the mama that my daughter had. And so I'll be out at Burger King getting an Impossible Burger, and a teen girl walking like, Lola Mama. So I think the most important thing that comes from the work that I was able to do with everyone is that I could keep safe who my daughter loved And then once my son gets old enough where he loves his friends in my home, knowing how that is providing them an opportunity to sleep somewhere, to get meals, so they don't have to turn to decisions that are unsafe. And so I think the most proud thing for me is, and I appreciate some people who have reached out to me on social media and said, do you want me to grab groceries? Because I see you complaining about these kids a lot. Yes, I do. Cash App is just my name. If you ever want to run me some coins for all them kids in my house. But I'm never going to turn them away because they need a place, and they may not be in the categories where their situation where their life is in danger. But if I can let you listen to me preach to you while you eat this pizza that I ordered, I've done my work.
That's it.
And beautiful, beautiful. As we talk about arts activated, for those of you who weren't here yesterday, this summit was just supposed to be a Saturday afternoon, and it evolved into a social justice series that began in Uganda. And with the Children of Peace of Uganda, you heard the same stories where we just heard right now. With Jane, they call her Mama Jane. It's about a community, it's about a love. It's not about one individual, but all of us coming together collectively to do what's in our heart to do. For people to give of a certain stance. We talk about till our pockets are hurting. Talk about till our hearts are hurting. And whenever we start to talk about from a true revolutionary standpoint, you have to be willing to sacrifice for Frida some parts of her career, because some people don't want artists to say anything. When I look at Nancy, to be able to tell her story with such boldness and to understand what comes from both ways, but to say, I'm going to do it to empower myself and to help others. I see so much strength. I see so much courage. And Debbie, for you to tell us and teach us all, we all need to have Kwaku days and Debbie days and whatnot. It is just so powerful how we see the global connection of what this summit has done. It has connected Africa to Asia to America and to all parts of the world where we understand now that we know. And there's an old saying that it says, the only thing it takes for evil to persist is for good people to do nothing. A lot of times we say in here, we're preaching to the choir, so that means we are the good people. So the only thing it takes for these evils to persist is for us to listen to these stories, to cry, to think well about them, and then go home and return to the status quo, to our normal day-to-day thing. Our lives should not be the same after this. We're going to open it up to questions.
Thank you so much for what you have said here today. It's all been very powerful. My question is, for the trafficking that's happening in plain sight, what are definitive signs that we should be looking for when we're at the bus station, the airport, train station? What are ways we can identify that, we think someone might be being trafficked? And in that case, what is the course of action that we can take to do something about it if we think that it's what's happening in front of us? Thank you.
Well, because human trafficking is the third largest criminal enterprise in the world, and estimates are that one girl can make one trafficker upwards of $150,000 a year, I'm going to say that if you come in contact with it, you need to be cautious. Our hearts will make us do things that our brains are telling us don't do that. So I would caution you, I will give you a couple of signs, but I would caution you, don't run up to people that you think are being trafficked and try to rescue them unless you have the means to do that and then someplace to put them afterwards. Because housing is a big problem when you start talking about human trafficking. They may or may not make eye contact with you. In some cultures, it's an insult to make eye contact. So you can't say if they didn't make eye contact with me, they're being trafficked. But you may notice a younger girl with an older person that is controlling them. They can't speak for themselves. If it's in a labor trafficking situation, they may not have control of their documents. So there are a lot of different things that can be added to that. What I would suggest is that you get trained. I'm really big on that. If you get trained, because I could throw out something to you here today and you're going to take it and run with it and you'll run up against a situation where that didn't apply. So I know that we'd like to have a 1, 2, 3 quick fix for that, but there is no quick fix. I would suggest that you get trained if you want to start working with people that are being trafficked.
Nancy, did you want
I always say that the rule of thumb is if you can have a description of the person that you see, get very good descriptions. If you can get a license plate to hand to the authorities, to a follow-up. If it's in your neighborhood, you can always do a welfare check on that house and have somebody to come out to the house. If you're a school teacher and you notice that some truancy and some behavior, you can, always, again, do a welfare check. But like Debbie said, please don't put on your superhero cape and try to save the day. There are people in place already that need to do that first follow-up. And then if you know somebody for sure is being trafficked, there is the missing and exploited number that you can actually call to make, the call as well. So there's a lot of things you can do, but the first thing you can do is educate yourself and get the training necessary in order to make that person safe, but definitely make yourself safe.
And I'll just add one to that because I asked Kay the same question, Kay Buck, the CEO of Cost LA, and she said the same thing, do not wear your superhero cape. She said exactly the same thing to me. But at many panels post the film, we kept getting asked, the same question came up over and over again. And Kay said a fantastic thing at that point. She goes, if you care so much, yes, educate yourself and get trained, but also get to know the local organizations in your neighborhood, in your community that do actively do this work. Yeah. Because you need to be in communication with them before you go out there and do something that might even jeopardize and put this girl at greater risk. Mm-hmm. And so what I would say is whichever part of this country you live in, figure out your local communities that are organizations that are actively doing this work and try and understand from them what can be done.
And I would like to add that, human trafficking is a supply and demand business. So we have to also hit that demand side. So our HEMAD project gives men the opportunity to stand against human trafficking. So keep in mind that that is an option as well, working both sides of that issue.
That's right. That's right.
All right. And I just want to remind, we have 8 minutes on the clock before lunch, so I want everybody to be able to ask their question, but ask it in a manner in which we might be able to allow all 6 people to be able to ask that question. Sure.
Ladies, thank you so much for your testimony and the work that you do. I'm honored just to even be in the space. I work with Youth Justice Milwaukee, and my question to you all is, could you give us some practical advice for legislators and decision makers in the room instead of locking young girls up? The work that I do works around young people in the justice system and working to eliminate incarceration of young people. Can you talk to us, because some folks don't know that judges lock up young girls because they're trafficked. Can you share with us some suggestions on what are some other things that can be done instead of locking up children in our system?
So I'll just give a couple and I'll let the rest of the panel answer, is that we have to be very mindful of trauma. Trauma, we always ask the question, what happened? Trauma asks the question, what happened to you? Mm-hmm. People are specific things happen to them, and we have to address that in a way of healing and not in a way of punishment or punitively. Mm-hmm. So if we can change laws to do that, that's just one thing, but go ahead.
What ends up happening is when you're talking about penalizing those that have been victimized already, we have to continue to educate those that are having that first point of contact. And so when we're out here educating the police, we're out here educating the healthcare facilities and other places, we're giving them opportunity to think outside of their occupation. So when we're doing that, we have the pleasure of going in and teaching, saying these are some of the red flags and warning signs that they would have looked for before, which actually helps them to identify local places where they now can give that person, without harming them, a way out if they need to. So that it starts at the local level, the grassroots level, before it can get to the top, because the top can't see it if they're not in it.
That's right. And I just want to add, because of course that's my background, the policy advocacy. So it's multiple layers. Each local municipality has control over what happens with their localized police or sheriffs. Mm-hmm. And so some police are locking up for protection in some towns to prevent that person from going back to traffickers. And so the policy at the top is saying, don't lock them up, but police are trying to do what they're calling, see my air quotes, good work around making sure that if this person is making a decision to return to their trafficker, that they're preventing it. So there's layers to that issue, but that means anyone who's working in youth justice, and I know you're already doing this, you're just really elevating the message, we have to talk to each level of government to make sure that from the national to the state to the local municipalities and governments, that they are interpreting the laws properly. Yeah. So it's the understanding of safety versus exactly what Dr. Lassiter said. What happened to you will then include the arrest. But the police officer thought the arrest was because this person is going to go back to the trafficker. So it's layered. Getting involved with policy change on all levels is the only solution so that we can force training around the first responders.
That's it.
It's happening in Milwaukee, but obviously it is not making it to everyone.
Yes.
But it needs to be enforced by community groups that advocate for the treatment of youth in the injustice system. Oh, I called it the injustice system.
And so we have 4 minutes. We have 4 minutes left. And we must stay on time, so I'm going to ask all those who ask questions to remember that, and maybe just one panelist to answer the question. Some of them will be around for some questions, but there's a time schedule that others have to keep, so just keeping that in mind.
All right, I'm 5'2", so I don't think that's going to work. But my question is, more and more in social media, you're seeing more Black and brown children coming up missing. Do you feel that that's more results of social media giving you more access to information, or more so that it's more targeted now towards a certain demographic of people?
Go ahead.
Social media is always going to want you to see what they want you to see. They want to paint a picture that it is a poverty issue so you can turn your eyes away from things that are real. For me, social media is the side of two evil coins, one good and one bad. If you use it for good, a lot of people are captured, a lot of people are sent back home, a lot of eyes are available, a lot of ears are able to get the girls and boys back home. But a lot of times what we don't see is the other part of it because they don't want it shown. So again, that's why that word hidden in plain sight is very real, because some people don't say that they've been trafficked. It's my boyfriend, I'm getting up out of the mud. It's my man, I'm making a living. This is not what I'm doing. So if you don't identify that you're being trafficked, of course you're not going to put it out there that you are.
Thank you. Next question.
Hi. Yeah, I'm a grandfather of a 15-year-old girl. And we went into McDonald's one day, and I stepped away from her to order the food. And as I went back to her, this guy passed me, kind of smiled. He kind of like stopped. When I went to her, we finished our food. We went out, and she said that this guy started talking to her, was asking for a phone number. I got a superhero cape, so I was ready to go back in there, and But resisting that, to give her the speech, I later went back to that McDonald's and talked to the manager. This McDonald's in Chicago on State Street and State and Dearborn, it's a historic district where all of the pimps used to patrol because the bus station used to be on the corner. I had no idea that this was still going on. When I talked to the McDonald's manager, he laughed. I said, dude, this ain't funny. He says, well, what do you want me to do? I can't stop these. I said, I can stop them, but it's like you have to be aware of this stuff. Like I step away for like 2 minutes, and this guy's already, in that mode. He's already in the player mode. He's told her, and she's smiling when she's telling me this, right? Which really pissed me off, right? Because she doesn't know. She's 15, impressionable. Somebody has found her attractive. She's tall and skinny, look like a string bean.
So who doesn't like for somebody to say that you're cute? But just so you know, it's in all 72 counties of Wisconsin. It's all over the world. It's not just at that McDonald's. It's at a bunch of different McDonald's.
This is a question. I talked to the manager. He laughs, right?
Yeah.
Now you've given me some ideas about how to approach places like McDonald's institutionally.
Yeah.
To have them do some awareness in their stores.
Right.
Because if it's going on at this one, and like I said, it's a historic district,
Right.
They keep them out of the bus stations now, right? So why can't McDonald's keep them out? Why can't Burger King keep them out?
Well, they try to keep them out of the bus stations, but they're still there.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to have to stop it right there. I appreciate that, and that's something we have to think. I see the young queen. I'm going to let her get the last question. To the other two, I apologize. Maybe you can come up and talk with them after they take their pictures, but we'll do this last question, and then The panelists will go take their pictures and then go to the green room for interviews, and then we'll all break for lunch. Your question?
Thank you. Thank all of y'all for your work in sex and human trafficking. My question is about regarding the forming of the the Human Trafficking Task Force. How do y'all navigate working together as marginalized people and as women of color? And how do y'all navigate doubt of your capability as well?
So none of us actually represent leadership. Dana World Patterson is sitting right here in the front row, but thank you for giving me permission. So there are meetings that are scheduled, and before you leave here, make sure that you talk to Dana to get access to the meetings.
Raise your hand, Dana.
The meetings are the best way to get, really more than anything, it's a coalition of people making sure that those voices are there. So the key is be at the meetings, advocate for the audience that may not be present, and increase the table. But it is an open meeting, you can get invited, but we're not going to announce dates or locations here for reasons that are clear and obvious. But speak with Dana before you leave so that you can get connected and get more involved. It's part of the Commission on Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault. And so, of course, it's a public commission, it's a public space because it's in the health department.
Can we give another round of applause for our moderator, LaShondra Vernon, Ms. Fraser Pinto, Ms. Yancy Yarbrough-Banks, and Dr. Debbie Lassiter. Wonderful job, ladies, wonderful job. If you go over to the side, take pictures, and then exit to the green room for your interviews. And lunch is right next door for everyone. So we'll see you back after lunch where we'll talk about fair housing.